All right. Welcome back, everyone. So, some updates. The Chinese Communist Party is now using its COVID pass as a form of social control. We saw them, for example, already use it to shut down a protest. And what they do is they change your health code from green, which means you're free, to red, which means you got to quarantine mandatory for 2 weeks, being not free. You have to go to one of their quarantine facilities. So anybody who is violating essentially the interests of the Chinese Communist Party got thrown into one of their quarantine camps for 2 weeks because the CCP can now use these health code apps used for COVID as a way to basically send people automatically to the Gulag. Of course, the CCP, while it's mandatory 2 weeks, can hold them there indefinitely if it so chooses. And this is raising some questions over some of the other security issues we could be seeing with the technologies that have been created for COVID-19 and these different types of health codes they're trying to roll out, especially as they try to get into biometrics and like DNA level monitoring, stuff even the World Economic Forum is trying to promote right now. I'll be getting into that, and also some of the stuff happening right here in the United States that is kind of aligning with that as well. Also, we're going to have a special guest today, Tiffany Meier. You might know her from China in Focus. We're going to be talking about how the Chinese Communist Party is gaining control of a lot of U.S. agriculture. Not only agriculture, but even food processing plants, food industries globally. Going to become a lot more serious and a lot more important, as we enter food crisis here and abroad, but also as the Chinese Communist Party goes deeper into its own problems with food. Because again, if the pool of available food gets smaller and smaller, and one country just so happens to control international assets providing that one good, well, who's going to get it? I can tell you right now, as we saw previously, probably the Chinese Communist Party, unless something's done about it. And I mentioned a bit briefly, I think last episode, but I want to go more into today. The Texas GOP, the Republican Party, has now declared that Biden's presidency is illegitimate. A huge move. And I'll talk about what that means and some of the other moves they're making right now. Folks, on another note, you might remember our episode yesterday about SADS, sudden adult death syndrome. YouTube deleted our video. I half expected it, to be honest, but again, raising the point that there's some stuff we just can't talk about there. So, folks, those of you watching on YouTube, as always, we will be jumping over to Epic TV exclusively after about 20 minutes. Frankly, there's a lot of stuff we can't say on YouTube. They will delete our videos, and I'm not going to self-censor anymore. I'm done. I'm done with the self-censorship. If they delete the videos, so be it. But come breathe the air of freedom. We're giving you a free trial. Jump into the description below. Free 14-day trial. Join us on Epic TV. Again, we do an hour-and-a-half show every day, so just 20 minutes on YouTube. And even that's like too much for them sometimes. They deleted 2 of our videos, I think, in the past 2 weeks. They deleted one of our January 6 videos, and now they've deleted the one on SAD. So there's stuff that they don't want us talking about. All right, that's it. Let's jump into the first story. I want to talk about this COVID Gulag FastPass. And maybe YouTube's going to be mad at us again, but that's their problem, right? It says here, this is Epic Times reporting. Chinese city uses COVID-19 app to prevent bank protesters from gathering, depositors say. Now, basically, in China, there was a run on the bank. And, we haven't had a good old-fashioned bank run in a long time. The use of a bank run was kind of delegitimized by the Federal Reserve, because the Federal Reserve, when banks make predatory loans or bad investments, normally in history they go out of business, which incentivized the banks to not rip people off, to not make bad investments and destroy people's savings and all these other things, right? Banks had the incentive to not go out of business, so they tended to act a lot more responsibly. For example, if we didn't have that, you wouldn't have student debt, where people are, basically have debt they can never pay off, because if they default on their debt, well, the banks go out of business. They never get their money back. Now, though, we have the Federal Reserve and different types of government programs that bail out the banks, so banks can do whatever they want, essentially. But China did just have a bank run. But the Chinese Communist Party intervened in its own way and sent them to the Gulag. Let me explain. says the Chinese regime is using COVID-19 control measures to stop depositors whose savings were frozen by rural banks from protesting. Several depositors told the Epoch Times on June 14th that the health code on their COVID-19 app turned red as soon as they scanned venue barcodes at Zhengzhou. Now, remember, the CCP is like the ones who the Chinese Communist Party, they're the ones who first rolled out the COVID, the COVID pass, essentially. The health code on your phone, or the vaccine passport, I guess some people call it, where basically, if you're considered, safe by the government, if maybe you have your vaccines and maybe you're free of COVID, you have your freedom, but they can strip that from you very quickly if you don't get your vaccine or you don't have your pass. Now, in China, that is on their smartphones. If you have a green health pass, you're free. If you have a red health pass, you're going to the mandatory Gulag. They have quarantine facilities you have to go check into, and you can't leave until they say you can. So these people go to protest, and what happens? Their health codes all suddenly turn red, and all of them have to go to the Gulag. Let me explain a bit more. Now, an estimated 1 million customers were reportedly affected, which has left many residents' life savings at stake. This is the bad investments from the bank, right? The bank just messed up people's finances. People wanted to protest. People's life savings were lost. They can't pay for regular Medicare. Depositors have been cut off from at least 39.7 billion yuan. That's about $5.91 billion. And aggrieved depositors across the country planned another protest in Zhengzhou on June 13th to demand an answer for what just happened to them. Essentially the bank just ripped them all off, froze their money, and they couldn't get it, right? $5.91 billion frozen, and for China, that's a lot of money. Although previous gatherings were met with silence from local authorities and violence from plainclothes police officers, however, their plan was thwarted again as their health codes turned red at the city's train stations or highway entrances. So the CCP has found a new form of social control, and this is really raising some of the concerns people have about the COVID apps in general. That, okay, fine, we're in a pandemic, they say at this point. Who knows how serious it actually is. A pandemic that they're acknowledging is over, but they still want to roll out these social control platforms using the pandemic as the excuse. And then you have organizations like the World Economic Forum and Fauci and Gates talking about rolling out similar technologies, for the sake of future pandemics and future things. Then they talk about integrating all these other social programs into it, like, digital currency, like, for example, biometrics. Remember the video I showed you the other day where the World Economic Forum's proposed app wants you to give your blood so they can have your DNA on store, which then works as, again, a biometric monitoring system. So, in other words, this is no longer just about COVID. This is about social control. And social control done in such a way where everything will basically be digital and everything is controllable by the government. In China now we're watching where that could go because they already have this. And already we're seeing the CCP, the government, although the CCP tends to be pretty brutal in general, already using it for things that have nothing to do with the virus, nothing to do with public health. They're instead using it basically as a tool for human rights abuses. Now, before we go on, folks, we do have a sponsor today. Today's episode is brought to you by American Hartford Gold, and becoming a lot more relevant given the recession and given, 75-point interest rates coming, and they're moving to like 3.5 interest rates soon within the next 6 months. Inflation is already at its highest levels in 40 years. Interest rates are skyrocketing, and a recession now looms ahead of us, pretty much no matter what country you're in. Caught between a runaway inflation and a recession, our retirement accounts are in real danger. If you want to protect your future, you can call American Hartford Gold. They can show you how to protect your savings and retirement accounts by diversifying your portfolio with physical gold and silver. All it takes to get started is a short phone call, and they'll have physical gold and silver delivered right to your doorstep or into your IRA or 401k. And they make it easy. They're the highest rated firm in the country with an A+ rating from the BBB and thousands of satisfied clients. If you call them right now, they'll give you up to $2,500 of free silver on your first qualifying order. So don't wait. Call them now. That's 877-260-2764. Again, 877-260-2764, or you can text Joshua to 65532. Personal recommendation, silver tends to be, gold and silver both tend to be pretty stable. Silver's a lot more stable. Good for just a solid, keeping your finances free mostly from inflation. Throughout most of history, it's been one of the main currencies, and so it tends to be pretty dang reliable. All right, folks, continuing on this COVID FastPass / Gulag FastPass, let me show you what's happening in the United States. Because right now we're seeing the Biden administration looks like it's going to extend these emergency powers. Even though remember, CDC has acknowledged that pretty much the pandemic's over. Fauci himself said the pandemic is pretty much over. Bill Gates himself said the pandemic is pretty much over. But they don't want to get rid of the emergency declaration. They don't want to get rid of the emergency powers. Remember, previously the CDC acknowledged, again, the pandemic's over. We're in the endemic, meaning we're in the indefinite stage of it now, where COVID's very likely going to be a seasonal illness. Maybe it is maybe it was the flu from the get-go, because the flu disappeared when COVID came about. But they want to keep in place the new powers they've given themselves. And the CDC noted when, again, they were up for possibly being ended last time, these emergency powers, that were they to end these emergency powers, they would lose the ability to monitor public health crisis to the degree that they are. And they're arguing that they need to be able to monitor things even though it's over because of possible future threats, or because maybe monkeypox has infected a little over, I think, 1,000 people in the entire world, right? There's plenty of diseases that have more than 1,000 infections at any given time. And if every one of those diseases is suddenly used essentially as like the excuse to have totalitarian government, which is what this is, powers government is not meant to have, because they're using an emergency authorization to give themselves additional powers, then the question is, well, are we still the free country we used to be? Or are we living under like a virus dictatorship, essentially? Now, let me show you this. This is Epoch Times reporting. Biden administration plans to extend COVID-19 emergency, official suggests. It says Don O'Connell, further in, HHS Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, said during a Senate hearing that the administration is sticking with its promise to give states ample notice prior to terminating the public health emergency declaration. Now, Health Secretary Javier Becerra, an appointee of President Joe Biden, has continued the trend. Becerra last extended the emergency on April 2nd for 90 days. That means it will expire in mid-July, this coming month, unless it's extended again. And if they're saying that, again, it's going to expire next month, pretty soon, just a few weeks away now, but they're saying they want to give states ample time. If they're doing that, they haven't alerted states yet. And the fact that they have not alerted states, as they said they would if they do plan to end it, suggests they're going to keep extending it, basically. Now, Walensky said this is really interesting. Walensky said there is no longer a public health reason to bar people from entering the country, defending her decision to rescind Title 42, which enables the quick expulsion of legal immigrants on grounds they may have COVID-19. Illegal immigrants. A federal judge in Louisiana has blocked the Biden administration from lifting Title 42 on immigration. Now, Walensky said that she misspoke when she said there was no longer a public health emergency. This is the funny thing. Whether it's Fauci, whether it's Walensky, whether it's Fauci, whether it's even, in fact, Bill Gates, all of them at different points have acknowledged the public health emergency is basically over. But they keep walking their statements back because they want to keep the public health emergency powers, which again suggests this is about power and not about an actual emergency. Now, further in on this, right, it raises the question, I think, of whether this is actually about public health or if it's about, frankly, the policies they want to keep in place. One of the big concerns being the types of policies they used to change election protocols in 2020, which allowed things like what we witnessed in the documentary 2,000 Mules by Dinesh D'Souza, where different states bypassed a state legislature, which under the Constitution is in charge of regulating elections in the United States, bypassed them to make things legal that are normally illegal. And what's the easiest way to break election laws? You change the election laws, right? It's the joke that it's not robbery if the government passes a law saying they can rob you, right? It's not election fraud if they legalize. It's not a crime of election fraud if they legalize election fraud. And that's what they did. They legalized things that would in any other circumstance be illegal. Universal mail-in ballots, eliminating, chain of custody on ballots, drop boxes, you name it. And then in addition to that, you had Mark Zuckerberg pouring money to these areas. And part of that was making agreements with local districts. If they want his money, like a kickback scheme, if they want his money, they have to loosen election standards. Things, again, like universal mail-in ballots, ballot drop boxes, and the things that were used to rig the election. Right? Now, on this note, really is the vaccine response to COVID-19 is this pre-planned. Let me show you some more on this. Epic Times had this story as well. It says vaccine response to COVID-19 was pre-planned. Authors of new book, The Courage to Face COVID-19, are saying. They're suggesting that what we saw during COVID-19, the outbreak of the virus, the policies seem to have been something that were already in place. Now, we can look, for example, at Event 201, where Bill Gates, again, not trying to single him out, but he keeps coming up. The World Economic Forum, other groups that keep talking about how to politicize the virus, were planning for the emergence of a new coronavirus 2 months before the new coronavirus emerged. And as part of that, they messed with the numbers in ways that are not representative of COVID-19. But regardless of having messed with the numbers to make it seem like, again, a virus of this nature be way more deadly, way more virulent than it actually was, they used the drill to basically lay out the protocols for COVID-19 when it did come out. And again, they had Event 201 about 2 months before the virus actually happened, before the outbreak happened. Now, these authors are saying during the research for their book, The Courage to Face COVID-19, Preventing Hospitalization and Death While Battling the Biopharmaceutical Complex, new word, Biopharmaceutical Complex, kind of like the military-industrial complex. Cardiologist Dr. Peter McCullough and author John Leake discovered that the system was primed by global leaders to make vaccination the principal response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And they're saying this is McCullough. This was absolutely telegraphed from the beginning. In 2010, way before any of this, Gates says it's the decade of the vaccines. Same guy who wants to cull the human population, right? Later on, Gates announced at meetings that the return on investment on vaccines is 20 to 1. In other words, it's a profit-making scheme. Anything else that he's done. Now, McCullough was referring as well to a 2020 post by Bill Gates on Twitter in which the billionaire investor, guy who made Microsoft, wrote, "Decade of vaccine, a $10 billion 10-year pledge for vaccine research, development, and delivery." I won't go to this whole thing, but they do lay out a lot of the information we've discussed about many times before, suggesting again that COVID-19, we could argue, natural, intentional, leaked, or not, whatever it was used as a vehicle to carry out policies that were pre-planned. Used as a vehicle to carry out the types of government protocols and government programs that they wanted to use anyways. COVID-19 merely gave them a vehicle through which to do it. Whether we believe that in the deadliness or virulence of the virus in general, right? They used it. That's the big issue. On this note as well, Dr. Anthony Fauci, everybody's favorite doctor, is being called out for, secret royalty payments. So he's been getting kickbacks for a lot of his work. Epic Times has this story as well. Now, Senator Rand Paul on June 16th pressed Dr. Anthony Fauci on the royalty payments he received while working with the federal government. Recently disclosed information, we didn't know this before, showed that Fauci was one of hundreds of scientists of the National Institute of Health, NIH, to receive royalty payments. Fauci got 23 payments between October 2009 and September 2014, but it is unclear how much money he actually made. And so Rand Paul was asking him, can you tell me that you have not received a royalty from any entity that you ever oversaw the distribution of money in research grants? Have you ever received a royalty payment from a company that you later oversaw money going to that company? And Fauci responded, I don't know, as a fact, but I doubt it. He got 23 payments. It's known he got 23 payments. He's saying, I don't know. I doubt it. He's not saying he didn't. That's the important part. He's not lying before Congress. He's not committing a crime here. He's basically saying, I don't know, even though the documents show 23 payments. He got 23 payments, kickbacks, very, very possibly of different kinds. And then, of course, Rand Paul said, well, why don't you let us know? Why don't you reveal how much you've gotten from what entities? Now, on that note, the Epoch Times has submitted a Freedom of Information request for that. We're trying to get it. We'll see if we can get it. I'll keep you updated. One thing we found is that if you submit a FOIA request, Freedom of Information request, anyone can do it. It's hard to do it, though. It's hard to get the documents, though, unless you sue them. And so we're suing them, folks, if they don't give it to us. And we're going to try and get those documents for you. We'll keep you updated on that. Also, again, we're going to have Tiffany Meier on in a bit, but I want to show you something because it's what we talked about, and sure enough, they went and did it. Monkeypox, folks, is actually discriminatory. Monkeypox is offensive. And they had to change. They're changing the name of monkeypox now to protect people from discrimination. The National Pulse has this story. Scientists want to change the name of monkeypox to make it non-discriminatory and non-stigmatizing. You might remember my recent episode where I was talking about how monkeypox is already being politicized. It's pretty much mostly, like overall, mostly spreading among gay men, among homosexual men. And, you get in trouble for saying that these days. But this raises the issue of, well, look, are we talking about medicine and public health crisis, or are we talking about politics? If a virus is affecting one group of people predominantly, then you should say it so they know how to protect themselves. You don't go and try to cover things up for the sake of, not offending people. Not only are they trying to cover things up and not mentioning that it's spreading mostly among homosexual men, but they're also trying to change the name of it to make it less offensive. Now, remember, the COVID-19 used to be called the China virus. That was like what people were calling it originally. It was also called the Wuhan coronavirus. But, different Lancet, Nature, a lot of these organizations were rolling back actual scientific reports because they decided that saying the virus came from China is offensive to the Chinese Communist Party. Who a lot of them are getting money from, ironically. Anyways, folks, bizarre stuff. That said, we have a few more segments that I want to go into, so stick around. I want to go into the GOP declaring that Biden is not the legitimately elected president of the United States. They're saying Biden's illegitimate, which is interesting because the Texas GOP is basically saying Trump is the president in exile. They're also moving to secede from the Union again. I'll be detailing what Texas is up to. Folks, we're also going to have Tiffany Meier on from China in Focus. We'll jump into that in just a bit. First, though, let me show you this trailer. Truth Over News had an interesting piece. State attorney generals are seeking Biden injunction after whistleblower documents reveal true aims of his Ministry of Truth. They lied to you about their Ministry of Truth, the Disinformation Governance Board. Let me show you this.
New behind-the-scenes planning documents disclosed by Senators Chuck Grassley and Josh Hawley contain shocking evidence of the real purpose of Biden's Orwellian Disinformation Governance Board, which became known as Biden's Ministry of Truth. The documents are part of a trove of documents given to the two senators by a whistleblower. Shockingly, the whistleblower files show that the board was conceived as a means for the Biden regime to push tech companies to censor Americans. Two state attorneys general, Missouri's Eric Schmidt and Louisiana's Jeff Landry, are now seeking a preliminary injunction to stop Biden and his administration from colluding with social media giants such as Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube to suppress free speech. These latest moves and revelations go to the heart of the First Amendment, the constitutional right to exercise free speech without government interference.
Anyways, good stuff. Again, that's Hans Monk and Jeff Carlson. Great show. Truth Over News. Check them out on Epic TV. That said, folks, if you're on YouTube, join us on Epic TV. They deleted 2 of our videos in 2 weeks. So join us on Epic TV. They deleted our video from yesterday talking about sudden adult death syndrome. There's stuff we can't talk about on YouTube. So jump over now. We're giving you a free trial, 14 days. It's in the description below. Join us. We have a great discussion over on Epic TV. And again, we'll see you there. Again, we go an hour and a half. So join us over there. See you there. All right, folks. We have Tiffany Meier on with us? Let's see if we can bring her on. Folks, those of you who have never seen China in Focus, fantastic show. Tiffany Meier's the